Welcome to the deep dive. You know how sometimes you hear a claim that just makes you scratch your head a little?
Yeah, totally.
That brings us to a concept we've been looking into, alternative facts. Dictionary.com tells us these have been called falsehoods, untruths, even delusions. Basically, it's when something is presented as fact, but it goes against what we know to be real or true.
Right. And what's fascinating here is seeing how this idea, well, how it plays out when we look at specific events and the way people talk about them afterwards. It really makes you think about how we understand what's actually going on.
Absolutely. And today we're taking this idea right into the heart of a local election. We're diving into the unofficial results from the Maywood, Illinois election that happened on April 1st, 2025.
Maywood, okay.
Yeah. We've got Mayor Nathaniel Booker's post-election comments from Facebook, and we're going to dig into those claims using the actual vote counts and other information we've gathered.
Sounds good.
Our mission for you today is simple: to get a clear picture of what these election results really show, and to take a good hard look at some of the ways they've been well interpreted.
Exactly. We want to equip you with the information so you can, draw your own conclusions.
Okay, let's get right into this Maywood election then, starting with Mayor Booker's take. He thanked residents for votes he received in a Facebook post. No doubt that kind of support means a lot to any candidate.
Oh, it certainly does.
Yeah.
Local elections are often decided by relatively small margins, so yeah, every vote is significant, absolutely.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Mayor Booker stated that his highest count in the past 4 mayoral elections.
Okay, the last 4.
Right. Now, we pulled the official numbers from the Cook County Clerk's office, and they paint a slightly different picture. In 2021, he received 964 votes. Okay. In 2017, Henderson Yarbrough Sr. got 790. Going back to 2013, Yarbrough Sr. received 966 votes. And if we look further back, 2009, Yarbrough Sr. actually garnered 1,746 votes.
Wow, 1,746.
And let's not forget 2005, where Yarbrough Sr. again had 1,314 votes, or even 2001, where Ralph W. Connor pulled in a significant 1,974 votes.
Okay,
So when he says the highest in the last 4 elections, well, that's just not accurate based on the data. And, the data shows other candidates have received more votes even beyond that 4-election window.
right.
The clear takeaway here is that the mayor's claim of the highest count in the last 4 elections is, well, demonstrably false based on readily available data.
That certainly raises the question, why highlight only the last 4 elections when the historical record, shows a different outcome? It makes you wonder about the criteria used to frame that particular statement,
Right. He also mentioned that since the Cook County Clerk's office began uploading results in 1998, no mayoral candidate in Maywood had ever received 50% of the vote.
Okay, 50% since 98.
Now, the CFA, they confirmed this part of his statement is indeed true.
Yes, and while that's a factual statement, within those specific parameters, it's crucial to think about what that doesn't tell us.
Yeah. Like what?
Well, it doesn't give us any insight into voter turnout in those previous elections, or how many candidates were on the ballot. A lower turnout or a larger number of candidates would naturally make it more challenging for anyone to reach that 50% mark.
Ah, okay.
So, while technically correct, it lacks crucial context.
Right, that makes sense. Then Mayor Booker goes on to say he's extremely grateful to be the first mayor to receive more than 60% of the vote with a crowded field of 5 candidates.
But what's interesting to note here is the CFA's caution. They rightly point out that these are still unofficial results.
Right, unofficial.
Yeah. Once write-in and mail-in ballots are counted and the results are finalized, that percentage could certainly change. It might go down.
Good point. And then he calls this outcome decisive and says it highlights strong approval.
Strong approval.
But the CFA's numbers offer a really different perspective. They calculated that a significant 85.2% of registered voters in Maywood did not vote for him.
85%. Wow.
Yeah, based on the reported 15,059 registered voters and only 2,230 total ballots cast. So while he won the majority of votes cast, a very large percentage of registered voters didn't vote for him.
That really puts the idea of strong approval into a different light, doesn't it?
It really does.
While he won the election, the fact that such a high percentage of registered voters didn't choose him suggests the picture might be more nuanced than simply, a landslide of support.
It certainly does. And finally, regarding his Facebook post, the CFA also pointed out his continued solicitation for his nonprofit organization within what appears to be an official post about the election results.
Oh. Mixing the two.
Yeah, it does seem a bit unusual to mix those two in the same communication.
It does raise questions about the appropriate use of official platforms and whether it blurs the lines between his public role and his private interests.
Okay, let's shift our focus to the ballot referendum, because this is where things get particularly interesting when we compare the actual results to Mayor Booker's interpretation.
Ah, the referendum. Right.
There were two questions on the ballot concerning the village of Maywood's form of government. The first question was about repealing the village managerial form. That's where a professional manager oversees day-to-day operations.
Okay, the current system.
Yes. And the second was about adopting the strong mayor form, which would give the elected mayor more executive power.
Gotcha. Two different models of local government. And the way these questions were structured is really key to understanding the outcome.
Right. The unofficial results for retaining the managerial form were quite clear. 1,390 votes, or 66.57%, said yes, let's keep it.
Okay, over two-thirds wanted to keep the managerial form.
Exactly. While 698 votes, or 33.43%, said no. Now, for adopting the strong mayor form, the yes votes came in at 1,214, which is 58.23%, and no at 871, or 41.77%.
Now wait, if you just looked at that second result in isolation, 58% yes for strong mayor, you might think that a majority voted in favor of a strong mayor system.
And that seems to be exactly what Mayor Booker emphasized in his post. He stated he was thankful for the nearly 60% of residents who voted in favor of a strong mayor form of government, and that he looked forward to implementing the change residents had voted for.
This is where expert analysis is crucial. We consulted Jason Grant from the ICMA, the International City-County Management Association, and his interpretation is really important.
Okay, what did he say?
He explained that the question to retain the existing managerial form was the primary question.
The first one.
Yes, because the majority voted yes to keep it at 66.57%. The second question about adopting a strong mayor form effectively becomes moot. It doesn't matter.
Moot, so like irrelevant.
Pretty much. This situation underscores a critical insight. When interpreting ballot results, you always have to pay close attention to the relationship between different questions, as the outcome of one can directly impact the others.
Okay, let's make sure we've got this straight. So even though more people voted yes on the strong mayor question than no on that specific question.
Right, the 58% versus 41%.
Because a larger majority, the 66%, voted to keep the managerial form on the first question, the strong mayor option doesn't actually go into effect.
Exactly. For the strong mayor form to be adopted, two things needed to happen. First, a no vote on retaining the managerial form, which didn't happen.
Right. They voted, yeah.
And then a yes vote on adopting the strong mayor form. Since the first condition wasn't met, a majority voted to retain the outcome of the second question, regardless of its majority, doesn't change the village's form of government.
Wow. So despite Mayor Booker's statement expressing gratitude for the support for a strong mayor system, the unofficial results, when you actually understand them properly, indicate that Maywood will retain its managerial form of government.
That's right.
That's a pretty significant difference between the mayor's interpretation and what the data and the expert analysis suggests.
It really highlights how important it is to look at the full picture and understand the logic behind how ballot questions are structured. Focusing on just one result can lead to a very inaccurate understanding of the overall outcome.
Definitely. Let's just quickly mention the other unofficial election results to give us a complete overview. For mayor, the Cook County Clerk's unofficial results show Nathaniel George Booker with 1,270 votes, that's a slight difference, 2 votes, from his Facebook post at 62.90%.
Okay.
Isaiah Brandon received 550 votes, 27.24%, and Mary May, Larry got 199 votes, 9.86%.
Mm-hmm.
For clerk, Tori Guerin won with 1,102 votes, 51.59%, followed by Cassandra Green with 741 votes, 34.69%, and Deanne W. Baker with 293 votes, 13.72%.
Got it.
And for the 3 trustee positions, Asia Ousley, Antonio Sanchez, and Steve Smiley received the highest number of votes.
So these results provide, a broader context for the mayoral race and the other elected positions in the village.
Exactly. Now, it's really crucial to remember, as the CFA also emphasized, that all of these numbers we've been discussing are unofficial results. Super important point. Yes.
There's a formal post-election process that has to take place.
That's right. This includes the canvass, where election officials carefully reconcile the number of ballots cast with the number of registered voters who participated. Then there might be post-election audits to ensure the voting equipment functioned correctly. And finally, the certification.
Right, certification.
Which is the official confirmation by election authorities that the results are accurate. So, while these unofficial numbers give us a good indication, they aren't final until that certification process is complete.
Which brings us back full circle almost to this whole idea of alternative facts.
Yeah.
This term really entered the public consciousness back in January 2017 when Kellyanne Conway, who was an advisor to President Trump at the
Oh,
time,
I remember this.
used it on NBC's Meet the Press to describe some false statements made by Press Secretary Sean Spicer about inauguration crowd sizes. Right, the crowd sizes. And what was particularly striking was Chuck Todd's immediate response. He didn't mince words, stating very clearly that alternative facts are not facts, they're falsehoods.
Yeah, that was a moment.
That direct rebuttal really cut to the heart of the issue with the term itself, didn't it?
Absolutely. And it really connects to this wider conversation around post-fact or post-truth environments, where sometimes it seems like objective facts are less important than emotional appeals or personal beliefs. It even brings to mind Stephen Colbert's concept of truthiness. Remember that? The idea that something feels true, even if it isn't actually supported by evidence.
Totally. Truthiness. And if we think about the power of language, the term alternative facts has a somewhat unsettling Orwellian quality to it,
Orwellian, yeah.
almost echoing the doublethink from 1984, where people are expected to simultaneously accept contradictory ideas. It just blurs the lines between what is real and what is not.
It's a powerful comparison. And we've definitely seen how the term alternative facts has been used since then, often with, a good dose of satire and memes and protests, highlighting the absurdity of trying to equate falsehoods with established facts.
It's become a kind of shorthand, hasn't it? A way to point out when someone is presenting something as true that simply isn't supported by the evidence.
Exactly. So as we wrap up our deep dive into this Maywood election, we've seen some pretty clear differences between Mayor Booker's initial statements on Facebook and the unofficial election data that's publicly available.
Yeah, quite a few.
Particularly regarding his historical vote count claims, the percentage of registered voters who actually voted for him, and most significantly, the actual outcome of the referendum, questions about the village's form of government.
And it's worth repeating that while we focus on these unofficial numbers, the official post-election processes are still underway, and there could be minor adjustments to the final certified results. However, the core discrepancies we've highlighted, they're unlikely to change significantly based on a few mail-in ballots.
Probably not, no. But even with that in mind, this situation really highlights how interpretations of data, especially right after an event like an election, can sometimes be quite far removed from a straightforward reading of the facts.
Definitely.
And that brings us back to the central idea of alternative facts, the potential danger when narratives are built on interpretations that just don't align with the evidence.
This raises a really important question, I think, for everyone. In a world where information is so easily accessible, what responsibility do both people in leadership positions and the general public have in making sure we have a shared understanding of basic facts and figures?
Good question.
Especially when it comes to something as fundamental as our elections. How did these different interpretations shape the stories we tell ourselves and ultimately impact our communities? It's definitely something to keep in mind as we continue to follow these events and maybe similar situations elsewhere.